Okay, imagine this. A tiny strip of land, just miles wide,
Uh-huh.
but crammed with over 2 million people. Smaller than a lot of suburbs, really.
Yeah.
And its name just immediately brings to mind, conflict, suffering, generations knowing mostly hardship.
It's quite a picture, but the sources also talk about this incredible resilience,
Right.
right? People just trying to live.
Exactly. That human story underneath it all is one of the most densely packed places on the planet.
It really is, a sort of microcosm, you could say. All this history, politics, human drama, just squeezed together. To get the bigger picture of the region, you really have to zoom in here.
And that's what we're doing today, a deep dive into the Gaza Strip. We've got this stack of sources you shared, articles, histories, reports,
Right.
all trying to help us grasp the past, the present, the future hopes, but always from that human angle.
And just to be clear, our goal isn't, solving anything or picking sides. It's about unpacking these sources, pulling out the key info, and shedding light on the human experience described in this material, sticking just to what's in front of us.
Okay, let's unpack this then. First things first, the basics. What and where exactly is the Gaza Strip?
So it's this narrow piece of land, eastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea.
Right.
On a map, you'll see Israel bordering it to the north and east, and then Egypt down to the south.
And it's shockingly small physically, isn't it?
It really is, yeah. Only about 41 kilometers long.
Wow.
And maybe 6 to 12 kilometers wide, depending on where you measure. The total area is just 365 square kilometers. Tiny.
Which leads right into that population density point. It's just incredible.
It is. You've got around 2.2 million people living there. And the sources that make this comparison, the density is actually higher than places like Tokyo or New York City.
Higher than Tokyo, that's hard to even picture.
I know. Imagine trying to manage infrastructure, resources, just daily life with that kind of concentration.
It must affect absolutely everything.
Hmm.
And these 2.2 million people, who are they primarily?
They're predominantly Palestinians. And a really key point from the sources is that the vast majority, something like 1.7 million, are registered by the UN as refugees.
Refugees, so people displaced from elsewhere.
Exactly. Them or, their descendants, people who fled or were expelled from other parts of historical Palestine back in 1948, around when Israel was created.
So the very makeup of the population today is tied directly to that huge historical moment.
Which I guess brings us to the deeper history. Where do the sources say we should start to understand the conflict?
Well, to get the context, the material suggests going back to the late 19th century.
Okay.
That's when the Zionist movement really started gaining momentum, advocating for a Jewish homeland in Palestine. At the time, it was part of the Ottoman Empire, mostly Arab Muslims and Christians living there.
Then things shifted under British control. Right, the British Mandate period, that was 1917 to 1948. And during those years, Jewish immigration into Palestine increased quite a bit.
Which led to problems.
It led to, growing tensions, friction, unrest between the newcomers and the existing Arab population.
Okay, then jump forward to 1947. The UN gets involved.
Yeah, the UN proposed the partition plan. The idea was to divide Palestine into two states, one Jewish, one Arab.
And how was that received?
Well, the sources say Jewish leaders accepted the plan, but Arab leaders rejected it. They felt it wasn't fair or equitable.
And that rejection, plus the British leaving, that leads to the 1948 war.
Precisely. Israel declared independence in 48, and the first Arab-Israeli war broke out immediately.
And this is when many Palestinians ended up in Gaza.
Yes, hundreds of thousands became refugees, many fled or were forced out, and a large number ended up in the Gaza Strip. After that war, Gaza actually came under Egyptian administration, not Israeli.
Right, until the next big turning point, which the sources identify as.
The Six-Day War in 1967, that's when Israel captured Gaza and also the West Bank and East Jerusalem.
And this started the long military occupation.
That's what the sources mark as the beginning of the direct Israeli military occupation of those territories, yes.
But the occupation inside Gaza changed later, in 2005.
It did. Israel pulled its soldiers and settlers out of Gaza itself in 2005.
Okay.
However, and this is stressed in the material near 5, Israel kept control over Gaza's airspace, its coastal waters, and most of the land borders. Egypt controls the southern border crossing.
So no boots on the ground inside, but still external control.
Yeah, and because of that continued external control, the UN and many international bodies, according to the sources, still consider Gaza to be under occupation.
Right. So what has that period since 2005 looked like? without Israeli forces inside day to day.
It's been marked by, well, repeated cycles of conflict. Violence flares up. The sources really highlight the rise of Palestinian armed groups within Gaza, especially Hamas.
And Hamas ended up running Gaza.
Yes, the material says Hamas took administrative control in 2007. This was after they won legislative elections and then had violent clashes with Fatah, the party that governs parts of the West Bank.
Okay. And since Hamas took control?
Since then, Hamas has been involved in multiple wars with Israel. The sources make a stark point here. These conflicts have resulted in thousands of deaths, and the overwhelming majority have been Palestinian civilians.
Thousands of civilians.
Yeah.
That's easy. And that ties into the living conditions now, doesn't it? The
Yeah.
sources talk a lot about a blockade.
Yes, definitely. Since Hamas took over in 2007, Israel and Egypt imposed what the sources describe as a near-total blockade on Gaza.
Okay, a near-total blockade. And the reasons given for it. The sources mention different perspectives.
They do. They note Israel states it's a security measure, basically to stop Hamas getting weapons or launching attacks.
Right.
But then international human rights organizations, which are cited in the material, they describe it very differently. They call it a form of collective punishment affecting all the civilians in Gaza.
Collective punishment. Wow. So what does that actually mean for people living there day to day?
It means huge restrictions on almost everything. The economy is crippled. Healthcare is severely impacted, education suffers, and crucially, freedom of movement is drastically limited.
How so? Like, people can't leave.
Very rarely. The sources give examples. Doctors find it hard to travel for specialized training. Students struggle to get permits to study abroad. Workers can't easily look for jobs outside Gaza. You need special permissions, strict conditions, and it's often denied. It creates intense isolation.
And the basic humanitarian situation based on these descriptions sounds pretty grim.
It's consistently described in the material as a prolonged humanitarian catastrophe.
Catastrophe, like what specifically?
Things like access to clean drinking water being severely limited, electricity often only available for a few hours a day, hospitals lacking basic medicines, equipment, unemployment is incredibly high. The sources cite over 45%.
Over 45%.
Yeah. And widespread poverty. Many families living on less than $2 a day. There are reports mentioned in the sources of children going hungry.
That's just devastating. And layered on top of those daily struggles is the threat of more fighting.
Absolutely. The material lists several major military operations since 2008, 2009, 2012, 2014, 2021, 2023, plus countless smaller clashes. So life is lived with this constant uncertainty, this risk of violence erupting again.
And the physical damage from these conflicts must be enormous.
It's described as devastating. Hospitals, schools, homes, crucial infrastructure like water systems, power grids, all have been repeatedly damaged or destroyed. Tens of thousands of houses gone, hundreds of thousands of people displaced, often multiple times just within Gaza itself.
Beyond the buildings and the casualty numbers, there's that invisible cost, the psychological impact.
Yeah, and this is where the sources really bring home the human reality. Every round of violence deepens the trauma, especially for children.
I can only imagine.
The material mentions high rates of mental health problems, anxiety, depression, PTSD among young people who've never known anything else. And there's this one detail from the sources that really sticks with you.
What's that?
Children drawing pictures of bombs. It just says so much about their reality.
That's powerful. So with all this hardship, this conflict, what role has the international community played? What do the sources say?
Well, the material mentions efforts by the UN, the Red Cross, various NGOs, different countries, providing humanitarian aid, trying to mediate peace talks.
But has it been enough? Does it make a difference?
The general sense from the sources is that the support, while vital, has been consistently insufficient given the scale of the crisis.
And there are obstacles, too. Systemic ones.
Yes. The sources point out that UN resolutions that call for ending the occupation or respecting Palestinian rights often get blocked or ignored. Vetoes in the Security Council are mentioned, sometimes citing the United States specifically as using its veto power in ways others disagree with.
So political roadblocks. What about getting aid actually in?
That's another major challenge highlighted in the material. Aid delivery is frequently obstructed. Trucks with food, medicine, they get held up for long periods at the borders. Sometimes, the sources say, aid convoys or distribution points have even been hit during conflicts.
Wow.
Humanitarian workers face enormous risks, and even places that should be safe, like UN-run schools used as shelters, have been attacked, according to these accounts.
It paints such a difficult, almost hopeless picture sometimes. But the sources also emphasize resilience, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's crucial. Amidst all the grim reporting, the sources make a point of documenting the incredible human spirit. It's not just a story of suffering, it's also about people actively striving, surviving, maintaining their humanity.
How does that resilience actually manifest? What does it look like on the ground, according to the material?
It's in, simple but powerful things. Schools finding ways to stay open, kids determined to learn, young people writing poetry, artists literally painting on the rubble of destroyed buildings, doctors performing surgery using the light from their mobile phones because the power's out. It's this collective effort described in the sources just to live with dignity against overwhelming odds.
That adds such an important dimension.
Mhm.
Okay, so looking forward then, what do the sources say about Gaza's future? Is there any path towards something better described?
The future is portrayed as deeply uncertain. Real peace, the sources suggest, hinges on big political decisions, fundamental changes that seem very far off right now.
Hmm.
The material is quite clear. Unless the root causes of the conflict are addressed fairly with mutual respect, recognizing rights, ensuring security for everyone involved, the cycle of suffering in Gaza is likely to continue.
But are there specific alternatives proposed? Steps that could be taken?
Yes, the sources do lay out calls for action, things like a permanent ceasefire, a complete lifting of the blockade, major international support for rebuilding Gaza's infrastructure and economy. Also, meaningful steps toward recognizing a Palestinian state and getting direct, serious peace negotiations going between Israelis and Palestinians.
And the people in Gaza themselves, especially the young people mentioned in the sources, what are their hopes?
Their aspirations, as captured in the material, are just incredibly normal, heartbreakingly so.
Like what?
They want to study, get a job, travel, fall in love, build a family. The same basic things young people everywhere want, but which are often completely out of reach for them.
It just comes back to that basic human desire for a normal life, for dignity.
Exactly. And the sources offer a kind of final thought on how peace might actually be achieved.
Yeah.
The conclusion drawn in the material is pretty emphatic. Peace won't come from more weapons or tighter blockades. It can only really grow from genuine dialogue, from empathy, and from sustained international pressure demanding a just resolution. The sheer scale of human suffering in Gaza, the sources argue, it's like a constant cry for justice that the world can't keep ignoring.
So wrapping up this deep dive, the real takeaway, it seems, isn't just the history or the politics. It's about trying to see beyond the headlines, beyond the numbers.
Right to the individual stories. The kid drawing bombs, a doctor working by flashlight, the artist finding beauty in rubble, the student just wanting to travel.
It's about understanding the incredible perseverance it takes just to exist in that place.
It's to live.
And for you, listening in, maybe the question is, what does hearing all this mean? Why should this specific history, this ongoing reality, matter?
Perhaps, as some of the source material suggests, it matters because the lack of peace and justice there isn't just about Gaza. It kind of reflects something missing in our wider world, too.
It feels like a call, maybe, from these sources, to look not just with our eyes, but maybe with our hearts, too. To really listen to that cry for justice and think about what it demands from all of us. Something to definitely keep thinking about.